Haribol, Hare Krishna, Haribol, Haribol. Welcome, welcome. Today, 29th of April, Monday, 2024, and we're continuing our Jiva Tattva. And today is the disappearance day of Srila Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, and we'll speak something about him, and then we'll come into our subject of Jiva Tattva. So first we'll have a kirtan. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari O Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Jaya Giridhari Jaya Giridhari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Jaya Giridhari Jaya Giridhari Yashodanandana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajanandana Yashodanandana Brajana Yashodanandana Brajana Yamuna Tira Vana Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Amadhava Kunja Bihari Amadhava Jaya Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama Hare Hare Ramo Ramo Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo Ramo Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ramo Hare Ramo Ramo Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare Hare Itai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Itai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Haribo, Gaura Haribo, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Nityananda Rai, Nityananda Rai, Nityananda Rai, Jaya Nityananda Rai, Jaya Nityananda, Nityananda Rai, Jaya Nityananda Rai, Jaya Nandan, Jaya Gaura Hari, Sachinandan Hari, Jaya Sachinandan, Jaya Gaura Hari, Sachinandan, Jaya Jaya Radha, Madana Mohan Radha, Madana Mohan, Jai Radha, Madana Mohan Radha, Mohan Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, 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 Radhe. Radhe, 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 Radhe. Jai Shri Shri Guru Hare Radha Madan Mohan Ju Ki Jai Nitya Ki Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai Jai Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astota Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarasarashi Shimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarasarashi Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Jagat Guru Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarasarashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Ki Jai. Jai Paramahamsa Mahabhagavat Srila Gaura Kishodas Babaji Maharaj. Jai Saptam Goswami Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Nav Sarvabhauma Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Baladevi Dibhacharya Ki Jai. Jai Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Narayana Prabhu Treya Ki Jai. Jai Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Ki Jai. Rup Sanatan Shibata Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bharadasa Raghunath Ki Jai. Jai Swarup Damodar Ramananda Gauda Parsa Rajashul Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sika Holsi Krishna Chaitanya Ananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Shri Gauda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Antadvip Mayapur Simantadvip Gautamdvip Madhyadvip Koladvip Ritujit Udadvip Apmaka Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Go Dwarasabha Navamika Shri Brajamandal Ki Jai. Shri Radhakun Shamakun Jamuna Devi Ganga Devi Tulsi Devi, Bhakti Devi, Ki Jai. Shrimati Brinda Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Shrimati Yogamaya Purnamasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Ki Jai. Ketra Mandal Ki Jai. Sarva Vigna Vinasakari Shina Shingadev Bhagavan Ki Jai. Bhakta Prabha Shri Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai. Charidam Ki Jai. Chari Sampradaya Ki Jai. Charya Charya Ki Jai. Akara Mataraj Shri Chaitanya Mat Ki Jai. Shri Keshavji Gaudiya Mat Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Anantakoda Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Samagata Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaud Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Om Agina Timirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Priya Surupe Daita Surupe Prema Surupe Sahajabi Rupe Nijana Rupe Prabhueka Rupe Tatana Rupe Swabila Surupe Anapita Chirim Chirat Kurunavartino Kalo Samarapaitam Unnata Ujvala Rasam Swabhakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundaratu Dikatamba Satapita Sada Hridare Kandare Spuratu Vasachinandanaha Yam Pravajantam Anapetyam Apeti Krityam Dvaipaino Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti tam mayatayo tarvo vinidustam sarvabhutam hridim munimanatoshmi. Bhaktya vihina aparara lakshay shiptascha karmadi tarangamadye. Kripa tvam sharanam prapana vrinde namaste charanaravindam. Bhajami radham aravinda netram smarami radham madhurashmitasyam. Vadami radham karuna baradram tato mamanasti katyana kapi. Tavaivasmi najivami tvaivina iti vignaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam. I'm first of all offering millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Taradara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And I'm offering the same again millions of times unto our most beloved Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Taradara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And I'm offering the same again millions of times to our beloved Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchidananda Namane Gauda Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Vrayate, and all our illustrious Rupanuga Guru Vargya and all the Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord, my Dandavat pranams to all of you. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhavevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnave Namaha. So today is the Tirobhav disappearance day of Srila Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, a great stalwart disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was a great friend of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada also. And his departure was not so long ago. I don't know the exact year, but his samadhi is in Nandagaon at Pavan Sarovar. His samadhi is there, and we can see that, remember that place today, his last final resting place. He was a great, great kirtaniya. He would constantly chant the holy name, Mahamantra, and he would sing most beautiful kirtans constantly. This was his principal seva in this world. And just recently, we had the departure of our Avadut Maharaj from America, Avadut Maharaj, and he told me one story that he was in Jaipur with Srila Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, and they were sleeping on a roof together um, in summertime, because that's where you have to sleep in summertime, is on the roofs. So he was, Avadut Maharaj was sleeping next to him, and Avadut Maharaj woke up a few times in the night for the various noises and distractions, and every time he woke up, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was sitting up chanting very quietly, but he was chanting. He was basically chanting all night. And Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharati Maharaj tells a similar story on Parikrama, where he was staying with Krishnadas Babaji, and the same thing was happening. Many times, Bhakti Vigyan Bharati Maharaj had to get up in the night to attend to various services to all the different yatris. And every time he got up, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was chanting. So this remarkable nishta in Nam, a great example, a great stalwart practitioner of this true Sankirtan ras, this Sankirtan that he carried everywhere with him. And he would go to all the different mutts. He didn't have his own personal mutt, but he was most friendly with all the other mutts. So this was a great personality, and was celebrating his Tirobhav today. So Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Maharaj ki, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Srila Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. So now we come to our Falshruti, and we're into the first 5 verses. I'm sitting here alone today, so it's a different dynamic for me. So 5 verses. Pritivita yata kata dharma namachale
Bhagavata kahe Shava Paripurna Chale.
As indicated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1-2. All the philosophies on earth that are celebrated as Dharma are utterly deceptive. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes this point repeatedly, that these traditional four Purusarthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, are not describing the Nitya Dharma, the Nitya Prem, the most highest option for the jiva in this world. But these are deceptive because they're ultimately focusing on moksha. And we've said so many different aspects about this, how traditionally this was the pillars of the four spiritual practices that all places would um, or spiritual groups would follow. But now Bhaktivinoda Thakur is purifying that misconception that moksha is not the supreme goal, not the goal of dharma, artha, karma, and moksha, but actually this nitya prem is the goal.
Chale Dharma Chadikara Satya Dharma Mati Chatuvaragya Tyaji Dara Nitya Prema Gati.
One should completely abandon all deceptive dharmas and absorb his mind in true dharma. In other words, one should give up the fourfold goals of material life, dharma, artha, karma, moksha, and aspire solely for the ultimate destination of nitya prem. Yes, these um, like religious pillars, so to speak, are moods of religiosity, and that is not our path. Our path is prem towards that supreme Lord, not following these. We follow this to a degree, but it's not our goal. It's not our focus. It's not the ultimate.
Amitva Mimam Sabrame Nija Jade Buddhi Nirvishesha Brahma Gyan Nai Chira Shuddhi.
Those who are deluded identify themselves with matter. That is their error. However, one cannot be purified by such delusion and by sorry, be purified of such delusion by endeavors for nirvishesh brahmgyan. If you do achieve that state of moksha, which is the goal of dharma, artha, karma, moksha, that's the ultimate goal, then you still haven't connected to that supreme transcendental state. You still haven't come out of this material world. You're still in the temporary aspect.
Ivichitrata Hine Hale Nirvishesha Hoy Kala Samatulya Seya Aprakrita Noi.
The Mayavadi thinks Sri Krishna to be subject to the limitations of time, such as birth and death. It considers that he is not transcendental. Yes, the Mayavad, because he has no conception of transcendence, then he places the Lord in that same material, with that same material understanding. This is Mayavad. So he's putting the Lord into a material situation, saying that that Krishna is subject to limitations of time, such as birth and death. He's only seeing through the temporary lens of this Mayic, Nimitic vision. Thus, he rejects Sri Bhagavan's Vichitrata, astonishing characteristics, paraphernalia, qualities, and Leela. This is so tragic that the individuals don't have the knowledge, they don't have the inspiration, they haven't met a devotee, they haven't come in contact with transcendental literature. When we read these passages, we can understand how important it is for us to, at any opportunity, to try to bring the conditioned souls out of their delusion. And we have the tools, especially to inspire the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Anyone can do that, a child can do that. And we're giving the greatest benefit to the conditioned souls by encouraging them on this path out of this delusionary condition. Through this vicious attempt, he is left with the philosophy of Nirvishesh Brahm. This is what we just said in the previous verse. So again, this delusion of Nirvishesh Brahm, which seems so attractive to the non-devotee, that person who hasn't heard about Krishna and his qualities, his astonishing qualities, etc. He's left in this empty space, this void, which contains Shantaras. So that's part of the illusion of actually merging into that place.
Kande Gyana Haya Dharma Ache Sunishchaya Prakriti Haila Kabu Aprakrita.
Such base and contemptible gyan, which arises out of an attempt to dismember the divine form of Bhagavan, is only fit to be rejected. It is prakrita, materialistic, and should never be given credence as aprakat dham. So we have to know this distinction absolutely between matter and spirit. As we've said many times, this is the same as Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, very clearly delineating what is matter, what is spirit. Our whole journey, we have to realize this more profoundly day by day. Is this a material activity I'm engaging in, or is this a spiritual activity? Is this going to benefit my soul? Is this for the welfare of my soul, or is it going to be support my material identity? If it's simply focused on making money, for example, to support uh, my family, etc., but I'm not teaching my family about transcendental topics and I'm not practicing these topics myself, then it's called sakam. Then it's practicing with a desire for something in this world, just like Dhruva Maharaj. He went to the forest and he practiced diligent austerities, but he had a material aim in mind. He wanted a kingdom greater than his great grandfather. So ultimately, he achieved that because he had the spiritual master, Narad Muni. So, because of his mercy, he was able to achieve that goal. But of course, as soon as he had darshan of Krishna, then he said he felt he'd been looking for broken glass and then found the jewel of the Lord instead. So we must be very diligent about examining our daily activities in line with what is Shuddha Bhakti. Is it a rope Siddha Bhakti? Is it Sangha Siddha Bhakti? We want to come to that platform of Swarup Siddha Bhakti. So these paths of bhakti are all described in that beautiful book of Bhakti Vinod Thakur's, this Bhakti Tattva Vivek. And we're also going through these truths in Jaiva Dharma. So, Valshruti Ki Jai. So now we're on page 348. But first of all, I have to address a very um, good question that I was asked. That I had said that the jivas were manifested from the Brahmajyoti, but it's clearly saying on page 139 at the bottom of page 139, at the very bottom, the last sentence. Bearing all this in mind, the Siddhanta is that it is only Jiva Shakti, not the Chit Shakti, that manifests the Jiva. So I want to do like a very short recap just to explain this very, very clearly, because I have termed the Chit Shakti as the Brahmajyoti, which was incorrect to actually say. It wasn't explicit. The Brahmajyoti contains all of these Shaktis are emanating from it. It's described that from Krishna's left-hand side, Swarup Shakti, Sri Radhika, manifests. And from that Swarup Shakti, the Chit Shakti is manifesting. From the Chit Shakti is manifesting the Jiva Shakti. That's the sequence. From Krishna, but from Krishna's bodily effulgence, we can say that this Swarup Shakti is manifesting. So this is not explicit in its descriptions exactly, but the progression of the Shaktis are explicit. So when I've said previously that we manifested from the Brahmajyoti, it was more of a general terminology. It was not explicit. But now I have to undo that idea and present what I've understood now is the absolute reality. The absolute reality is that from Swarup Shakti, who is manifesting from Krishna's body, ultimately, the Chit Shakti is manifesting. And from the Chit Shakti, the Antaranga Shakti, Chit Shakti, Antaranga Shakti are the same. Then Jiva Shakti is manifesting. And that Jiva Shakti consists of the Tatastha Shakti within the Jiva Shakti. So this is actually the sequence. So the Jiva is manifesting from the rays of the Chit Shakti within the rays of the Chit Shakti, which comes into the Jiva Shakti. This is where the Jiva is manifesting from. He's manifesting from the Jiva Shakti in the rays of the sun, like Chit Shakti. So this is not easy to even just appreciate, let alone understand. So I was praying to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur to give me some guidance to have clarity on this fully. And I felt him intimating to me that we only need to understand a certain degree of this picture, so to speak. But if we keep going further and further, there can be so many questions. But actually, there has to come a cutoff at some point where we just become satisfied with understanding that from the Chit Shakti is manifesting the Jiva Shakti, because it's saying here clearly in the last line of page 339, bearing all this in mind, the Siddhanta is that it is only the Jiva Shakti and not the Chit Shakti that manifest the Jivas. So, but the Jivas at the same time are manifesting in the rays of the Chit Shakti. So, how can the conditioned souls understand this more than just in a very simplistic way? So, I hope I've got no one sitting in front of me today, so I can't ask them and examine that you've understood what I'm saying. But previously, I was saying that the jivas were manifesting from the Brahma Jyoti, but this is not correct. Actually, they're manifesting from the rays in the sun of the Chit Shakti, and those rays manifest as the Jiva Shakti. And it's the Jiva Shakti from the Jiva Shakti where this Tatastha Shakti resides, and it's from there that the Jivas manifest. So if we can understand this progression from Krishna, from his left-hand side, Swarup Shakti is manifesting. From Swarup Shakti is manifesting Chit Shakti. From Chit Shakti is manifesting Jiva Shakti. And within the Jiva Shakti is Tatastha Shakti. Krishna is Para Tattva. Krishna is the supreme Tattva. And Shri Radhika, Swarup Shakti, is the supreme Shakti. So it's all ultimately manifesting from her. But there has to be a cutoff point, so to speak, because otherwise we just come into a world of gyan and intellect. How can the intellect and mind approach transcendental subject matters? I was doing this in the sense that we made this diagram of the worlds. Some of you will remember it. We can post it afterwards. That cosmic map, it was called, or the Krishna map. So we were examining the picture of it, so to speak. And in the picture, it looks like that we're manifesting from the Brahmajyoti. But to be explicit, We are manifesting from Jiva Shakti, which is manifesting from Chit Shakti. It's described the rays of the sun of Chit Shakti. The sun of Chit Shakti, Antaranga. Chit Shakti is the um, uh, purest aspect. It's completely bright. So there's a message, see if I can get to read it. I can't read it. um, and from the rays of the Chit Shakti, then are manifesting the jivas are manifesting in the Jiva Shakti itself. So I think that's enough to appreciate something of this. So it's not, these truths don't just fall off the tree, so to speak. We have to apply perhaps many years of hearing these truths and meditating on them. But the principle is what I've just described. From Swarup Shakti is Chit Shakti, from Chit Shakti is Jiva Shakti, and from the Jiva Shakti, within the Jiva Shakti, is the Tatastha Shakti, where we are manifesting from. So when we become further advanced, then perhaps we will have a clearer um, picture of this, or perhaps not. It's not necessary. What is necessary is that we increase our devotion to that transcendental personality. Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami buddha tam yenamam upayantite. That by constant practice and devotion, Krishna gives the understanding by which the jiva can come to him. So these are parameters, so to speak, or these are helpful guides to appreciating our insignificance, our absolute insignificance in this world, and the nature of the worlds around us. So it's a journey to understand Jiva Tattva fully. So I hope that's clear or clearer than it was before. So there's one lady in Spain, Anjali, and she asked me this beautiful question. So I wanted to clarify that the jiva is not manifesting directly from what we would call the Brahmajyoti. The Brahmajyoti is more of a general terminology because within the Brahmajyoti there are many types of energy. Brahmajyoti is actually made of the Chit Shakti, but in a different impersonal way. So it's complex, but the principle is Swarup Chit Jiva. That's the principal Shaktis. Okay, so we'll come to our topic for today, which was about these similarities, what we did previously on Saturday, the um, jivas, um, similarities with Krishna. We talked about the Nata Swarup, Gyan Swarup, Bhaktri Swarup, Swaprakash, etc. Ichamayi. This is on page 346. And then Babaji is talking about the quantity distinction, which takes precedence, which is the prominent distinction, is that the jiva is so insignificant, even though he has these qualities which are similar, but the distinction is the infinitesimal nature of the jiva and the or the finite uh, jiva and the infinitesimal world, the great, the absolute reality, so much more extreme than the insignificant jiva. So it's limiting when there's no one here to um, directly uh, give me some feedback for what I'm explaining. So at the bottom of page 348, I'll read this last paragraph and then what Babaji comments. So we have Brajanath. If one can only prove the eternal difference between Ishvara and the Jiva, because this is what Babaji's been speaking about, the difference, How can one accept the oneness? Another point is that if there is oneness, do we have to accept a state of merging with Ishvara, nirvana? So, what is that oneness? We are like oneness with Krishna in the sense of we're coming from Krishna. We're Bibinamsa. We've described that before. We're separated parts of Krishna. Babaji will explain. Babaji, no, not at all. The jiva is not one with Krishna at any stage. How could that be? The jiva is not one with Krishna at any stage. Brajanath, then why have you spoken about achintya, beda, abed, inconceivable oneness and difference? So here again, it seems to be contradictions within what Babaji is saying and what is the actual Siddhanta. Babaji will explain. Babaji, from the qualitative perspective of Chid Dharma, there is oneness between Krishna and the jivas. This oneness is what we've explained on the previous page 3, 4, 6 at the bottom. These qualities that are the same. We've explained that already. So that's like the oneness between Krishna and the jiva. Nata Swarup, Gyan Swarup, Bhakti Swarup, Swaprakash, etc. But from the quantitative perspective of their essential nature and individual personalities, Swarup, there is eternal difference between them. Eternal difference between them. Despite the eternal oneness, it is the perception of difference that is eternally prominent. So the difference is prominent. We've already said that today. The difference is prominent, but they still have similarities, which creates the idea of oneness. Understand? It's very helpful to um, exercise the muscles in the consciousness to appreciate these conceptions. At least we're getting some type of um, uh, picture of our constitutional position here as an infinitesimal, tiny, tiny jiva. Uh, Despite the eternal oneness, it is the perception of difference that is eternally prominent. Though the Abed Swarup, the difference, is an accomplished fact, there is no indication that any such state has independent existence. The jiva doesn't have independent existence entirely. The jiva has independence, but his existence is not independent. We have independence to make a choice, but our existence is depending on the Shakti of the Lord. Rather, it is the manifestation of Nitya Bhed, eternal difference, that is always prominent. In other words, where eternal difference and eternal oneness are present simultaneously, the perception of Bhed is stronger. The perception of the difference is stronger. For example, let us say that the owner of a house is called Devadatta. His house is simultaneously Adevadatta, independent of Devadatta, right? And Sadevadatta, identified with Devadatta. So it's both at the same time. The house is separate from Devadatta, but it's also simultaneously identified with Devadatta. Even though from some points of view it may be considered independent of Devadatta, still its specific characteristic of being identified with Devadatta eternally exists. Similarly, in the case of Ishvara and the jivas, non-difference or oneness is not part of the essential identity. Even at the stage of Swarup Siddhi, just as the house can be called both Adevadatta and Sadevadatta, independent of Devadatta and Devadatta himself, from one perspective it may be viewed as Adevadatta, but still the real identity is Sadevadatta. because that is the bigger, the more prominent consideration. Okay? Let me give you another example from the material world. Sky is a material element, and there is also a basis for its existence. But even though the basis is present, only the sky is actually visible. Similarly, even within the abed existence and distinctive nitya bed, that's the nitya, the difference, which is real, is found. And that is why nitya bed is the only definitive characteristic of the essential reality, vastu. This distinctive difference, this is the absolute essential reality, is the difference, not the similarity. The similarities are there. We've already described the similarities between the Jiva and Krishna, but the difference is far greater to appreciate, understand. In one sense, it's very simple, but in another sense, it requires complete focus of concentration to understand it. Not understand it, but just to, again, I'm saying it all the time, to appreciate it. Our limited intelligence is probably not capable of understanding it because it's an eternal subject matter and we have no experience of eternality. Brajanath, please explain the eternal nature of the jiva even more clearly. So, what is the eternal nature of the jiva? Babaji, the jiva is atomic consciousness and is endowed with the quality of knowledge and is described by the word ahang, I. He is the enjoyer, the thinker, and the one who comprehends. The jiva has an eternal form which is very subtle, just as the different parts, the gross body, the hands, legs, nose, eyes, and so on, combine to manifest a beautiful form when established in their respective places. Similarly, a very beautiful atomic spiritual body is manifest, which is composed of different spiritual parts. However, when the jiva is entangled in maya, that spiritual form is covered by two material bodies. One of these is called the subtle body, linga sarir, and the other is called the gross body, stula sarir. The subtle body, which is the first to cover the atomic spiritual body, is unavoidable apariharya from the beginning, and the jiva's conditioned state until his. Let me just read again. The subtle body, which is the first to cover the atomic spiritual body, is unavoidable apariharya from the beginning of the jiva's conditioned state until his liberation. We cannot become liberated fully. We read many pastimes in the Bhagavatam, Prithu Maharaj, etc., where they, and Yudhisthira Maharaj also, where they drop their subtle bodies ultimately. When the jiva transmigrates from one body to the next, the gross body changes, but the subtle body does not. Rather, as the jiva leaves the gross body, the subtle body carries all its karmas and desires to the next body. The jiva's change of body and transmigration are carried out through the science of Panchagni, the five fires, which is delineated in the Vedas. The system of Panchagni, such as the funeral fire, the fire of digestion, and rain, has been described in the Chandogya Upanishad and Brahma Sutra. The jiva's conditioned nature in the new body is the result of the influences from his previous births, and this nature determines the varna in which he takes birth. After entering Varnashram, he begins to perform karma again, and when he dies, he repeats the same process. The first covering of the eternal spiritual form is the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and false ego. You can't see it, so it's subtle. And the second body is the gross body, which we can see, the five senses, etc. Prajanath, What is the difference between the eternal spiritual body and the subtle body? Babaji, the eternal body is the actual original body, and it is atomic, spiritual, and faultless. This is the real object of the ego, the real I. The subtle body arises from contact with matter, and it consists of three vitiated transformations, namely of mind, intelligence, and ego. This is the subtle body. Brajanath, are mind, intelligence, and ego material identities, material entities? If they are, how do they have the qualities of knowledge and activity? Babaji, he quotes from Bhagavad Gita, Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam mano buddhya evacha ahankara ityam me bina prakritya astada apariyam itastvanyam prakritim vidi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yeyadam daryate jagat etad yonini bhutani sarva niti nityo uparyaha aham kritsnyasya jagata prabhava pralayas tata. Bhagavad Gita 7:4 and 6. My separated eightfold apara or Maya Prakriti consists of five gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space, and the three subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego. Besides this, O mighty armed Arjun, I have a Tatashta Prakriti, which can also be called Para Prakriti, superior nature. That Prakriti is in the form of consciousness and the jivas. All the jivas who have manifested from this Para Prakriti make the inert world full of consciousness. The Jiva Shakti is called Tatashta because it is eligible for both worlds, the spiritual world, which is manifest from my Antaranga Shakti, and the material world, which is manifested from my Bahiranga Shakti. So again, we're describing the nature of the Tatasta Jiva. Since all created entities are manifested from these two types of Prakriti, you should know that I, Bhagavan, am the sole original cause of creation and destruction of all the worlds, of the moving and non moving beings. These shlokas of Gita Upanishad describe the two types of Prakriti of Sarva Shaktiman Bhagavan. One is called Para Prakriti, the superior energy, and the other is called Apara Prakriti, the inferior energy. They are also known as Jiva Shakti and Maya Shakti, respectively. The Jiva Shakti is called Parashakti or Shrestha Shakti, the superior Shakti, because it is full of spiritual atomic particles. The Maya Shakti is called Apara, inferior, because it is material and inert, Jad. So there's huge distinction between Maya Shakti and Jiva Shakti. Jiva Shakti has consciousness. Maya Shakti is inert, Jad. It doesn't have consciousness. So that's the distinction. The Jiva is completely the Jiva is a completely separate entity from the Apara Shakti, which contains eight elements: the five gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, and the three subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ego. These last three material elements are special. The aspect of knowledge that is visible in them is material and not spiritual. The mind is material because the mind has its identity, so to speak, from all the matter that it's absorbed to manifest its identity. The mind only has material senses, and it will absorb the material nature and energy. So the mind is a product of material energy. The mind is not a product of the spiritual reality because we've had no experience of that spiritual reality. As we progress in devotional service, as we meet great sadhus, for example, guru, then we come in contact with transcendence. And at that time, the mind actually is rendered helpless and inert practically because the mind can't access that place. It only appreciates that place. But to try to understand transcendence with just the mind is impossible because it's way beyond the capacity of the mind. Um, the aspect of knowledge that is visible in them is material, not spiritual. The mind creates a false world by basing its knowledge on sensual objects, on the images and influences that it absorbs from gross subjects in the mundane realm. That's what I've just said. This process has its root in mundane matter, not in spirit. For example, when we read the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a transcendental literature, it describes the nature of this world we live in. The nature of this world we live in is not the same as that which is presented by the material scientists today. They present it as being a round globe. But if you read carefully the fifth canto, it's a flat surface. And sane people today understand that. This process has its root in mundane matter, not in spirit. The faculty that relies on that knowledge to discriminate between real and unreal is called buddhi. This is intelligence now. So intelligence is something else, which also has its root in mundane matter. The ego or sense of I-ness that is produced by accepting the above knowledge is also material and not spiritual. So he's just explained very beautifully why the subtle body is material. Mind, intelligence, and false ego are material. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes in another place the mind is the only instrument we have to reach transcendence. So the mind is used for that purpose. These three faculties together manifest the jiva's second form, which acts as the connection between the jiva and matter. It's all of this aspect that acts to connect our identity with matter. We've spoken about this a lot. And is called the subtle body, linga sarir. As the ego of the conditioned jiva's subtle body becomes stronger, it covers the ego of his eternal form. The ego in the eternal nature, the ego in the eternal nature in relationship to the spiritual son Krishna is the eternal and pure ego. And this same ego manifests again in the liberated state. When we become liberated from matter completely, that means the subtle body is completely dropped. However, as long as the eternal body remains covered by the subtle body, the material self-conception, Jad Abhiman, arising from the gross and subtle body remains strong, and consequently, the Abhiman in relation with spirit is almost absent. In other words, we forget the reality that I am pure spirit soul, and we become completely convinced, hypnotized practically, to be considering that I am this material body. As long as the senses are strong to take advantage, to exploit the material energy, then it's going to be the greatest impediment to actually reaching a state of appreciating the real spirit soul. I think we understand all this clearly. The linga sarir is very fine. The subtle body is very fine, so that the function of the gross body covers it. Thus, identification with the caste and so on of the gross body arises in the subtle body because it is covered by the gross body. So these influences from the gross body are having an effect on the subtle body, and they're covering the subtle body rather than the spiritual, um, pure spiritual subject matters are purifying the body. If we're too concerned with the material existence, if we're too enwrapped in the material world, that's going to cover and influence the subtle body. Contrarily, if we're completely influenced by higher association, by devotional service, by Harinam Mahamantra, then that spiritual body will start to manifest and push back the gross coverings and purify the subtle body. Um, Thus, identification with the caste and so on of the gross body arises in the subtle body because it is covered by the gross body. Although the three elements, mind, intelligence, and ego, are material, the abhiman of knowledge, that means the identity of knowledge, is inherent in them because they are vitiated transformations of the function of the soul, atma vritti. Vitiated means variegated transformations. Brajanath, I understand the eternal swarup of the jiva to be spiritual and atomic in nature. Within that swarup is a beautiful body composed of spiritual limbs. In the conditioned state, that beautiful spiritual body remains covered by the subtle body and the material covering of the jiva swarup. And the material covering of the jiva swarup in the form of the jad sarir, causes its material transformation, jad vikar. So that spiritual body is covered due to the transformations of our consciousnesses in attraction to the dull material world. It's absolutely sublime if we can catch it even for a moment, what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying here. Now I want to know whether the jiva is completely faultless in the liberated state. Babaji, the atomic spiritual form is free from defect, but because of its minute nature, it is inherently weak and therefore incomplete. The only defect in that state is that the jiva's spiritual form may be covered through association with the powerful Maya Shakti. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:232, Yenya Rarindaksha Mukta Maninas Tvai Asta Bavad Avishtuda Budaya Aruya Krichain Rena Param Padam Tata Patyantya Do Nadrita Yusmad Angreya. O lotus-eyed Lord, non-devotees such as jnanis, yogis, and renunciants falsely consider themselves to be liberated, but their intelligence is not really pure because they lack devotion. Without this ingredient of devotion, they're not really liberated into the transcendental world. You can only access the transcendental world through devotion. They perform severe austerities and penances and achieve what they imagine to be the liberated position, but they still fall from there into a very low condition due to neglecting your lotus feet. Will always remain incomplete no matter how elevated a stage the liberated jiva may achieve. That is the inherent nature of jiva tattva, and that is why it is said in the Vedas that Ishvara is the controller of Maya, whereas the jiva remains eligible to be controlled. I've got here, eligible to be controlled of Maya in all circumstances. Should be controlled by Maya in all circumstances. So this is the ultimate reality, that we can be controlled by the material energy, but that control of the material energy is generated from our independent choice to accept it and exploit it. It's the antithesis of devotion. As long as we we can only be covered when I independently decide to turn away from the Lord. It's that independence that I have that gives me the option to be strong or weak. We cannot function without that independence. We've said before that independence is there ultimately to um, generate that affection for Krishna. It wouldn't be love unless we independently made that choice. This is very wonderful, this last paragraph, because it's going to lead fully into the next chapter, which is about the jivas that are possessed by Maya. So this last paragraph is a prelude, basically, to where we're going tomorrow, into the 16th chapter, where the jivas are possessed by Maya. So I pray that you have all gathered some profound appreciation for our nature as jiva, pure jiva, where we're coming from. We're coming from the rays in the sun of Chit Shakti, and those rays manifest the jiva Shakti, and we're coming from there. This jiva Shakti is where we're manifesting from, in the Tatashta, this place between the two worlds. This is principally what this 15th chapter has taught us. It's taught us so many um, truths of the various locations, etc., or the influences that the jiva is susceptible to. But this Tatastha Shakti is very clearly described here. So that's the great, great truth that we're taking away from this chapter, is the jiva is situated in this Tatastha Svabhav, this nature. His consciousness will oscillate. And we've said so many times that making the decision to come into this world was not historic, and making the decision to stay in this world is an ever-present reality, that we are choosing ourselves with this independent propensity to remain here by wanting to interact with the material objects rather than follow this beautiful direction that we've just described today of walking back to the spiritual state within us. I said at one point a few days ago how Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, he had said very beautifully how that decision to um, engage in the external energy rather than in the internal energy is what's caused us to be in this predicament. So appreciate that. It's the internal wealth and realization and appreciation that we are seeking. It's not something external. Everything in the external world, the external activities of devotion can generate the inspiration to reflect internally these devotional acts that we perform. But the purpose of these devotional acts is to remind us to meditate internally, to connect with that supreme law. We connect with the Murti, we connect with Harinam Sankirtan. Where does it take us to? It takes us to a internal blissful state of consciousness. This state of consciousness is what I'm talking about, is what the reality is, connecting with the highest state of consciousness that is there within the jiva. So many, many topics here that can lead to discussion and so on, and appreciation. I think the more we hear these topics, the more we can churn them, and the more fragments of realization we can have from hearing these repeatedly, these topics. So tomorrow we come into the very ecstatic chapter 16, which will describe the jiva possessed by Maya. And I think the connection with chapter 16 and chapter 15 will become uh, apparent, very clear. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gold Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Gold Premanandi. Actually, my feelings now are that I'd like to read the whole 15th chapter again and dive more deeply into it. And that should be the fruit of every chapter we read, just like the 14th chapter was so beautiful that I wanted to read it and study it again. But we're in process to actually move through this scripture. But also, I hope some of you will also feel inspired to read this 15th chapter again and make all these Shaktis that are described more clear and more um, uh, understandable to the mind. Dandavat pranams, Vanchakalpatrubhyascha, Kripa Sindhavevacha, Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnave Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.